You're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about their latest reads, views, and passions alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I am your host, Emily Goodman. You know me as Overdoing It host and Office of Library and Information Services Adult Services Coordinator, but I'm also, as related to today's episode, the Reading Cross Rhode Island Programming Chair, and my pronouns are she, her. Let's dive in and discover who our guests are today.
Yeah, sure. My name is Hanif Abdurraqib. My pronouns are he, him. I am a poet, essayist, cultural critic, writer, uh, dog owner from Columbus, Ohio.
Great. We love a dog owner. My dog is in the room with us, and hopefully he will stay quiet.
What kind
Um,
of dog do you have?
he's just a mutt, but he is about 70 pounds of mutt. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, same. I have she's half border collie, half Great Dane, so she's also
Oh
70
my
pounds. And
gosh.
it's
What in
yeah,
is
it's an
she
interesting mix.
fluffy like a border collie? Like more hairy?
No,
Or okay.
no, she's like she has a hair of she has a coat of a Great Dane, um, and kind of like the face of a border collie, and the energy of a border collie in the morning, but the energy of a Great Dane literally the rest of the day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like if my dog only had the energy in the morning, that would be great. But his energy tends to come out at the end of the day when I'm tired and I want to sit. And he's like, no, no, that's not what this time of day is for. I'm like, are you sure?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And there he goes whining. So a little bit later in the show, we'll talk to Hanif about his book, There's Always This Year, and Reading Across Rhode Island. But before we do that, we're going to start like we always do with what have you been reading?
I'm usually someone who doesn't get, I don't like getting galleys of books for a few reasons. One of them is I just really like going to a store and buying a book on the day it comes out. I don't, I
Mm,
grew up doing that with albums and music, and really don't get the opportunity to do that with music anymore. So books replace that. But that said, there were a couple books coming um like early next month that I was so excited about that I wanted to just get. So I went against my principles, and I'm right now reading Jailbreak of Sparrows by the new Martina Spada book of poems. And I'm reading Pathamata, which is a new Maggie Nelson. I'm like a big Maggie Nelson
mm,
dude. So um it's just her book. I think it also comes out like April, first week of April. And it's just like, as Maggie does, she's like honed in on one specific thing and kind of unraveling it very slowly. And it's just like about jaw, like mouth pain, like
mm.
literal jaw pain. um and so I am fascinated by that. I think I'm really fascinated by up close analysis of our body's failures. I think about that Janine, another book of poems I love that I got so into last year was Janine Joseph's Decade of the Brain. Um, I think new interest of mine is the way that people write about the both triumphs and failures of their bodies
Mm.
as they age. And that's, you know, it's kind of what I'm on.
Gotcha. I know that you're also a runner, so does that resonate with you with like how you feel your body changes as
Yeah.
you run over the
Yeah.
years? Yeah.
I think that's it. Like, I think this is all coming to the fore for me now because of the fact that, I pay such close attention to, I'm 41 and I run a lot. I run like, I'm bad at math, but I run like 7 to 8 miles a day, 6 days a week
Okay.
on average. And the fact that I could do that like feels great, like the fact
Hmm.
that but I am also aware that there's going to come a point where I will not always be able to do that. And then it will be my responsibility to listen to my body and get it what it,
Mm.
give it what it needs. And I think my engagement with these kind of works, like Janine's book or Maggie's book, or these, I just read this beautiful Anne Carson essay about handwriting as her the way her handwriting's
Mm.
changed as she's been afflicted with Parkinson's. Um, there's a kind of close awareness and attention that I am demanding myself to pay to my body, because I think that kind of close attention, if I am lucky, will afford me a real humility when it comes time to say, I can't do this anymore. I'd like to do something else.
Mm, that's interesting. I think I've spent a lot of my life mentally distancing myself from my body for various reasons. And so I really like that idea because I think also as a society, we're really good at pretending things aren't happening to our body if it's not quote unquote healthy, you know?
Right.
And
Yep.
so when our bodies start to change and or deteriorate in whatever way that is, we like to say like, oh, it's just temporary. It's just because whatever, like we're going to get through this. And sometimes it's like, no, this is just the new stage of what our body is. And being able, like you're saying, to intimately be aware of that helps you to accept what your body is at every given stage and to help it sort of be the best it can be in whatever stage it's in. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I'm someone who also just like left to my own devices, I wouldn't, but I pay any attention to
Mm,
my body. But I think, and not just like, I run more for my brain's health than
mm,
anything else. 'Cause I think I would lose my mind in many ways if I didn't have something to. But I also think like, now I feel like we're talking so much, but this is great. Perhaps I was talking last week with a friend about um, the older men in our lives and how
mm,
in the older men that we've known who just get so stubborn about like going to the doctor. And I
mm-hmm.
was like, that can't be like, I'm gonna go to the doctor. Like one thing about me is for real, I'm gonna go to the doctor, like not like on some, I'm there all the time, but if something feels off,
Yeah.
I just would like information. And I think
Mm-hmm.
um seeing a pandemic unfold and seeing a pandemic that it's like mass disabling event because many people
Mm-hmm.
still cannot work, cannot do many things due to the um, impacts and effects of it. Um, in seeing the way that the country kind of pushed so many people into denial about that,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it continued to honestly. So
Yeah.
it's really got me at a point where you know um, I would just like to have information so that I can perhaps humbly approach my own aging,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to being defiant in my own aging. And we'll see. The jury's still out. You know what I mean? Like, who knows?
You're
I
still
could
only
like
41.
feel like 41. Like 10 years from now, I could sprain my ankle on a run and then try to power through it. But I hope not.
I hope not also. Did your dog go running with you?
No, I wish. Well, do I wish? No. What I kind of like about my dog's name is Wendy, and what I like about Wendy is that she's so deeply entrenched in the kind of dog she is. Like
Mm,
she doesn't love walks, so we take walks, every now and then. Have a backyard. She just likes sitting in the sun. She really just likes looking out window. She's just so, she's 8 years old. She's about to be nine. She'll be nine in a couple months. Um, and she's just so entrenched in who she is. And I
mm,
think, when I got her, it was I was only supposed to have her for like a week. I got her in 2019, and she had been like locked in a basement for a year almost. And I was looking for a dog, but not super intensely. But I heard that, and I was like, well, I don't want that dog locked in a basement anymore. So bring her to me, and I'll hold
mm,
on to her for a week or two while we find a more stable home. But after the first couple of days, it was like, okay, this dog is, one, she just needed stability, and she needed
mm,
someone who she could trust to come home.
mm,
And to watch her kind of grow into the dog she is so yeah, she's not running at all. She will like run after me in the backyard if we're playing around, but she's not running like 6 miles.
mm.
She doesn't have that in her.
That's not the border collie part, right?
No, gosh, no.
Uh, all right. So something else that people who are listening may or may not know about you is that you're also really into music and discussing music. You have or have had a music podcast, I believe. So I thought
Yes.
that we'd also talk about what are you currently listening to, like on repeat? What can you not get enough of?
Um, Well, this is a good time because this has been a great, I listen to so much new music every week. And this was a specifically singular great week for albums. And so I'm listening to an album called All Cylinders by Yves Jarvis, who's a like French Canadian guitarist, and I love that record.
Mm.
Hope Tala's album Hope Handwritten is really great. Um, there's this the guy who runs XL Records, Richard Russell, has a production project called Everything is Temporary. Or I'm sorry, Everything is Recorded.
Mm.
Um, and Everything is recorded kind of, he produced a bunch of artists on like a compilation album, and that new album is really good. And I kind of, Banks, I've been kind of for most of Banks's career, I haven't been as into her as my peers have been. My peers have been really high on her, and I've been kind of lukewarm. But her new album, which is called Off with Her Head, is really special.
Mm. What do you feel like is different with this album than maybe her past work?
Yeah, it feels a bit um more sonically cohesive. I'm a big album, like I'm a capital A album guy.
Mm.
Because of how I think I don't know, I don't want to guess your age, but I'm imagining we are somewhat in the same generation, like
Ish.
close enough to where you remember a life of listening to music before streaming, I would guess.
Yes.
Um, and so the thing that's wild to me is that there's a generation of people who will not have that
Mm.
understanding, and so I really, I'm old enough to the point where I was listening to like cassette tapes, and so cassette tapes you can't really, it's not easy to skip around, so
Mm.
I really love an album still. And I feel like what streaming has done, not to become like an old man shaking a fist to the cloud, but streaming has not really incentivized making a capital A album that's
Hmm.
coherent and cohesive. Streaming has incentivized making a lot of songs and putting them together, And so I
Mm.
think this Banks record is really special because it feels like a really thoughtfully curated album.
Yeah. You know, I agree. I think I miss the time of listening to an album on a CD, in a way that like I think you can listen to albums and streaming, but it doesn't flow the right way. It isn't timed as perfectly. And I've toyed around with in Spotify, they have like this Spotify DJ that tries to do that sort of radio edit where it merges the ends and beginnings of two songs together. And I've often been really upset because it's cut out the last few lines or the last few bits of a song that I really, really love in
Absolutely.
order
Yeah.
to merge it with another. And I'm like, wait, no, like it wasn't done. It like you cut out a really big part of that for me. So yeah, I totally resonate with what you're saying about albums as cohesive pieces. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you do get some of that still, of course, but it's not as, the urgency isn't there because you're not really required to do it. You can kind of just, put together a bunch of songs.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And like you're saying, there's an incentive to just make a hit, a one-off piece, and not necessarily think about the art around it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, we will make sure that we link all of those things. And um, people may not know that libraries also have CDs that you can borrow. So if there's any in our collection of the things you just mentioned, we will definitely make sure that we've linked them in our show
The
notes.
library was I mean, I just did a big interview on this. I just did like a Song Exploder interview on this, talking
Mm.
about how important it was. I mean, libraries were functionally my record store when I was a kid. All the music I discovered on my own when I was a kid, particularly from ages about 10 to 14, all the library.
Really?
And, you know, that I mean, I talk about that every chance I get because that was such a formative space for me as a young music fan to be able to leave
Hmm.
my house and seek out music on my own, just in these little like listening pods at the library.
Mm.
Yeah,
So they
changed
had like
changed the
the
trajectory of my life.
headphones and things like you could actively listen to it at the library, not just take it
Yeah,
home. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, for sure. This was the 90s, so Columbus, they had these, like, at least my branch of the Columbus Library had these literal pods that you could sit in, and they had a CD changer. And what I liked when I was young is that the CDs in the CD changer, you were kind of at the mercy of the librarians. The librarians would fill
Mm.
them, and you wouldn't really see them. I don't know if people remember the old CD changers. You would just see the silver edge of the CD and not what it was. So
Mm.
for me, and of course, you go to a librarian and say, "Can I take this out and put this on?" But
Hmm.
I like this kind of mystery experience of just like putting on headphones and press and play and cycling through it. That's how I discovered the Clash. That's how I discovered the New York Dolls. That's how there's so many bands that that's how I discovered Fleetwood Mac to some degree.
Hmm.
Um, you know that's yeah, that changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow. That's cool. I remember going to like Barnes and Noble as a teenager and getting to like wear the headphones that they had to listen to
Mm-hmm.
just snippets of songs.
Yeah,
But I missed the pod era of the libraries having discovery music. That's so cool.
yeah, this is a good time.
All right, we're going to get into the main section of our episode for today to talk about what we've truly brought you here for, is talk about your book, There's Always This Year, and Reading Cross Rhode Island. So, for our listeners who may not know, Reading Cross Rhode Island, or RARI as we affectionately call it, is the state's One Book, One Community Read initiative. Each year, a team of dedicated volunteers read dozens of books, narrowing it down to 3 to 5 finalists for other committee members and community readers to read and then vote on. The program prioritizes timely books and themes, particularly embracing a book to action model to inspire readers to get involved in local organizations and initiatives, and to connect with authors who will visit Rhode Island for a flagship event. This year, we are so excited to be working with Hanif Abdurraqib, author of, as he said, so many works of poems and essays. But the book that we're talking about in this moment is There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. And so, Hanif, if you would, how do you describe the book to people in your life that might be different than the blurb that we will see on the back cover or online?
I haven't gotten. Gosh, I still, almost a year in, I have not gotten good at describing the book to my friends. But I will say, I tend to tell people that it is a book about the pleasures and brutalities of time,
Mm.
and what it means to be deeply aware of time as something that can be lost, time as something that kind of slips through our fingers, and how that is anxiety inducing, but also worth cherishing.
Mm.
And of course, it is also a book that is deeply grounded in a relationship to place,
Mhm.
um, and putting a critical lens on place, I think.
Mm.
Um, Asking more of place and just feeling good about being from somewhere.
So that is one of the questions that I actually had, and a thing that I was feeling. So I also listened to the audiobook, which you narrate, and was so beautifully done. I really appreciated it. And as I was listening, I kept having to stop and then go find my physical copy and like reread a line, right? And I felt like I had a few moments where it feels like the book is both a dedication to, particularly Columbus, but Ohio as well. But also a reckoning. And so, and this idea that places and maybe even people aren't perfect, but we love them anyway, and we can love things even when we want them to be different or we wish that they were better or different in a different way. And so I have two questions from that. And one is, was there a moment in time that you decided that Columbus was home for you, that that was where you were most resonating, or was it something that you realized after a culmination of things that led to that point?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's something that I keep realizing. I
Mm.
think I think about it like almost um, any other relationship that I have known and understood, which is, um, to me means that it's something you have to keep choosing. Like
Mm.
you don't choose to love someone once and then say, all right, we did it. You kind of
Hmm.
have to continually make that decision to return to someone. And you have to continue to make the decision to return to yourself. Like I don't think, at least for me, like some days I am better at taking care of myself than other days, and so much of that is falls into the process of decision making. And so a place is no different for me. Like I think to
Mm-hmm.
love Columbus is, and to realize that it's home for me, it's something I'm assessing all the time because my relationship with Columbus is complicated and is kind of sometimes steeped in some levels of frustration. And I'm constantly doing the math of what makes this place somewhere that I want to be and somewhere that I want to fight for and fight against.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how can I make it a place that everyone in it has the ability to love as much as I do, or at least the opportunity to try and love as much as I do? These kind of things. So it's an ongoing progress project. I hope it never stops. If it does,
Mm-hmm.
then I think I need to find somewhere else to be.
I love that. And why do you think that it's important for people to identify a place as home and to love it and maybe think about it in the ways that you do?
Well, I don't know if it's important for all people. I mean,
Okay.
I'm so anti-prescriptive in that way. Like I would never. I think it's important for me because it allows me to. I think like left to my own devices, I would just be in a cocoon and not leave. I would
Mm,
not leave my house. I'm a homebody. I don't go out. I go out and all that, but like I'm not like um I feel like there are writers who, and I'm not knocking this at all. I'm just saying there are writers who like being at the parties and the events, and I'm just not that. I'm not
mhm,
that. And so for me to be in a place I want to be in, and more importantly, to be among people I would like to be around, um, makes me realize that I am, in a sense, operating in a space that defines me. We rely on each other. My neighbors rely on me in some ways, and I try to rise to the occasion of being a good neighbor. I try to rise to the occasion of being a good friend, a good community member. These kind of things take me out of my um, kind of my organic comfort zone. And I think that is all tied to the fact that I have a lot of affection for this place, and I would like to
mm.
be the best person I can in this place. And so, that's also a relationship that's constantly evolving. But I believe in it.
Yeah. Well, even if you're not prescriptive about it, I hope um, that people find inspiration in this idea of identifying place and constantly thinking about it and trying to be, you know, as good to it as maybe it is or you want it to be to you, I think will get
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
will get us
I mean, I
far.
hope so. Or
Yeah.
yeah, I think like there's a way to like say, um, this has worked for me. It hasn't always been easy, but this has worked for me.
Mm,
And then leave it at that, and I think like people, if they're lucky, can maybe find their own way. But I mean, I write in the book about how people, I'm from a place that people leave or people don't see as worthy of staying. And um, for me, that just doesn't work.
mm,
Um, yeah, I require a bit more from a place that I choose to be in.
mm. One of the other things that I noticed, and that kind of resonated with me in the book, is that you often talk directly to the reader. And beyond that, you refer to the reader as friend. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your choice to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, really, that's a that's a trick borrowed from the poet and essayist Ross Gay, I feel like.
Mm,
But it's also, I begin the book with the direct address. The book begins immediately turning away from whatever fourth wall exists and making it clear that I, the writer, am speaking directly to you, the reader. So,
mhm,
in order to pull that off effectively, I knew going into the writing of the rest of the book that I would have to kind of maintain that. I would have to find a way to maintain that rhythm without it being overbearing or without it being annoying or without it distracting from the actual machinery of the storytelling. But what I am saying to someone repeatedly, and I'm also, I do this too, being very aware that the book is asking people to juggle a lot,
Mm-hmm.
thematically. Um, and so there's a way that acts as a reassurance, a hand on the shoulder that repeatedly says, I'm still here with you. Don't worry, I'm still here with you. I'm taking you to this place and we're still here together. Um, that felt to me like a necessity in some ways. Like it felt like we cannot move away from our understanding of um, this experience as a collective activity, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
I am next to you, you are next to me, we are figuring out something large. And as a last thing, I think it's also hopefully comforting to a reader, as it was comforting to me to say, I am exploring some things that I don't even have figured out myself yet. And so, you know, we'll get through it together.
Was this a book you wrote in a moment? Like, did this, you published it last year? Or did it kind of come to you in the last couple of years, or is this something that you've been thinking about and grappling with for longer than that?
Oh, for so long. Yeah, I think I wanted to write this book in like 2018, 2019. I didn't know how to write it. It's the
Mm.
thing. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing or what to do there. Um, and to me, it's a real testament to the fact that sometimes you have to write other books in order to write the book you want to write.
Mm-hmm.
Um, writing Go Ahead in the Rain taught me how to write this book, and writing A Little Devil in America taught me how to write this book. And it was a real exercise in patience for me to say, I don't quite know how to get to where I want to go. So that means I'm not ready to write this book yet.
Mm.
And that was, yeah, I mean, that was challenging. Because I think that as a writer, as someone who can be somewhat, I'm not competitive with others, but I think, due to my nature growing up as an athlete, I'm competitive with myself. And I
Mm-hmm.
like to imagine there's nothing I cannot do. Which again, to talk about like humbling oneself, to sit down and write a book and realize you don't know yet how to write it yet. For me, the answer to that wasn't let me power through and, make something. The answer was, okay, let me sit this aside and just keep the machinery of curiosity and excitement about this project going while I work on other things. And those other things will define what eventually comes, hopefully.
Mm. Did you end up having to do much research? Because there's bits about it that talk about the history of Columbus, and particularly I think about sort of the mafia and Danny Green and the specifics of that story. Like, are those things that you just knew, or did you have to learn about those things in order to write about them?
There's so much of this stuff I just knew, but you know, there's for me, there's research that involves seeking, and then there's research that involves confirmation.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes the research that involves confirmation opens yourself up to some seeking. Like for example, I think um, in the book, the mafia. I knew about the mafia stuff. I did not know until I went back into it how closely that lined up with the Cavs season. That
Mm.
Cavs season, I read it right. So, and there are ways where it's like, oh wow, this is kind of this is a story just waiting to be told.
Hmm.
The story exists. Um, and so yeah, I mean, I think very much that even if I knew things or even knowing things, um, doesn't make me want to stop from revisiting them and looking back into them and feeling like, you know, there's still something I can learn.
You also have segments in the book as dedications to what you call aviators. From Ohio. And so I'm wondering how you chose those, and also if you could talk about if there's one person, maybe besides LeBron James, um, who encapsulates to you everything that you might love about Columbus or Ohio in general. So how did you choose them? And then among them or anybody else, like who is your sort of peak Ohioan?
Yeah, well, I mean, I chose the aviators. I wanted to begin very literally, you know,
Mhm.
John Glenn and Lonnie Carmen, and then get kind of further and further away from this idea of aviation as we got in the book. I think further and further away from, or expanded upon, the idea of literal aviation, or I'm sorry, literal ascension.
Mhm.
Because to me, ascension isn't just something that takes you skyward or takes you upward. It is, I think, as the book evolves, it expands into anything that takes you from a place you are to the place you are dreaming, or to the place you want to
Mhm.
be, or to the place, or any place different than the place where you are standing. And so I started to toy with the idea of an aviator as someone who was engaging in that kind of movement. And that doesn't just mean, you know, going to the sky or taking to the sky. Um, it sometimes means, you know, if you are Toni Morrison, um, leaving a place and then writing about it in a way that affords it um, a real dignity, a real sense of dignity. And so, in terms of, I mean, I don't know, you know, I love John Glenn. I very much love John Glenn, who I write about in the book, and um, you know, part of why I love John Glenn, and I write about this in that small section in the book, is that approach he took of wanting to go back up into space when he was kind of past the age that was recommended as safe, quote unquote, to go back into space. But his decision and the way he went about that was in some way to say, I, um, you know, I have chosen what I'm willing to die for
Mm.
in some ways, right? Um, I will do the work to show you that, yes, it is not safe, but I can make it. And I just would like to see what it is. I would like to see the world from that high up one more time. And I admire that ambition in a way. I admire yeah. So maybe John Glenn, you know, he's kind of yeah, he means a bit to me.
Do you think that he was intimately aware of his body and its limitations and maybe where it was when he made that choice?
Yeah, because he had to be. He
Mm.
did all this like science on himself to show that like the same things that happens when you age are the same things that happen as you into like exit the Earth's atmosphere. So
Hmm.
he was someone who just like medically, clinically had to have a real close relationship with his body um, to figure out, you know, what was possible in terms of his literally physically being able to go back into space, you know.
Mm.
Um, and I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah. Okay, before we close out with our last chapter segment, I thought I would ask you, you are coming to Rhode Island in a little over a month as our author. Have you been to Rhode Island before? If so, what are you excited to come back to? And if not, is there anything you're excited about doing or seeing while you're here?
Yeah, you know, I lived in Connecticut for like 2.5 years, and I spent a lot of time in Providence. And you know, I was at AS 220 doing poetry stuff all the time. My dear friend, the poet Franny Choi, was there. They were there at the time, and they were kind of like, you know, helping me manage my displeasure for living in Connecticut by coming to Providence, because it's not that long of a drive.
Hmm.
Um, and another wild fact is that I almost lived in. I was almost
Oh.
my family. I mean, I was born in Columbus by virtue of the fact that that's where my dad got a job first.
Mm.
But it was between Columbus, you know, my dad and mom. My dad had a hard time finding jobs in New York, and so the plan was to just move. And he almost took a job in Providence. You know, he was like, you know, it's just that the Columbus. I believe the story is the Columbus job just got back to him first.
Hmm.
Um, and had that happened, I would have been born in Providence, born and raised in Providence. So, um, and I actually think Providence is, maybe I just imagine this because of the circumstances that I just described, but I think about Providence all the time as kind of like a sibling city to Columbus. I think there's a lot of
Mm.
similarities, not in size, but I think in um, Yeah, I think it's a similar city. Yeah.
That's interesting. I was in Columbus just about this time last year for a library conference. It was my first time, but my friend had just recently moved to Cleveland, and so I got a taste of Columbus through that conference, and then Cleveland. And I do like Columbus has some really good food scene going on, which I think Providence does as well. So I could
Yeah.
see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
All right, so we close out our show with what we call the last chapter, where we talk about a library or bookish related question. And today I wanted to ask you, when you walk into a new bookstore or a library, what's the first thing you go to? What do you check out first?
Poetry section.
Yeah.
Poetry section always. I think, um, we're seeing a really good in the past like 5 years, just a really great evolution of poetry sections in bookstores, especially
Hmm.
because I remember, when I was coming up as a poet, 2016, 2017, 2018, I would go into indie bookstores and there just wouldn't be, a robust poetry section. Um, for many reasons. Like there are many reasons for that. I'm not, but I don't know, like all around the country, because I travel so much and I go to so many bookstores. Um, the evolution of the poetry section has been really beautiful to see and really heartening to see, because it's not just like we got some books and we're going to throw them here. They're like really carefully and thoughtfully curated poetry sections. Um, and that excites me. That's like so yeah, I'm always, the first stop is seeing what the poetry section has to offer.
Is there something about a bookstore's poetry section that makes you feel like this is great, perfect, like other
Yeah,
bookstores should take note from this one?
they have poets who are not only American.
Mm.
Um, like, poetry is such a global form.
Hmm.
Um, and to have poets who represent the global nature of the work is, and I will say, like, that's another thing that's just evolved really beautifully, I think, over the past several years, is the poetry sections are so expansive in what and who they represent.
That's awesome. Yeah, I usually check out the displays first.
Mhm.
I think I'm really drawn to a nice like forward-facing book, and I like to see also what the staff are recommending. I feel like that gives a good vibe for what the place is like and who the people who work there are like.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Hanif, for joining us. And thank you for everybody who's listening. We're really excited to have you come in April for our key author event and to talk to you. I won't be me, but we as a state will talk to you more in April.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Hanif will be in Rhode Island for a free author event on Tuesday, April 22nd. For more information and to sign up, go to ribook.org. If you'd like to respond to the last chapter question or just reach out to the show, send us an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at overdoingitpod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help us reach more Rhode Islanders. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and is brought to you by library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. Thanks again for listening. This has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. We are overdoing it, but you're doing just fine.